Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. Still trudging our muddy way through Chronicles.
Ugh, yeah. And I'm not even allowed to drink. It's 9 a.m. for me, and I have errands to run. This is unfair.
I'll do the drinking for both of us then.
Oh, you're so generous.
Indeed. So, who is reading today, or do we have any opening comments?
Yeah, this chapter is composed of several psalms, so we're finally going to read psalms, kinda.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Is it
so
just-
it's gonna be boring.
I mean, it's very familiar. Some of these psalms are, I think, used in like daily prayers as well. Although, yeah, there is textual variation between
it's a
between
No, sorry.
what you see in psalms and what you see here. There's slight differences. Also, it seems to open up with one psalm, one chapter, and then you have a completely different one, and then after that it then brings back the first one again.
I mean, it's a mishmash of several songs.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Sorry, finish with this thought.
I mean, the verses 1 through 3 are parallel with 2 Samuel 6, 17 through 19, and then you have a 4 through 6, which I think is 4 through 7, which is a separate like chronicle reading, and then 8 to 36 is the psalm itself, which I've read some commentators that say that this actually stems from the chronicler himself. This entire psalm is later adapted, so it varies.
I mean,
that is possible. I mean, the whole idea of the Psalms of David, I realize literalists are very, of course, they're all actual David, real David. He wrote them all personally. With his own hand, but it's very much an Asian thing not to take credit for your own work, but to, say, oh, a wise man said, this Confucius say kind of thing. Same vibe. You would attribute all wisdom to Solomon. You would attribute worship songs to David. Like, it would be arrogant not to. And then you have all this wound into other psalms later on that are more standardized. So it's an interesting journey.
Yeah. I wonder if at the point where the chronicler is writing the psalms, which I'm almost sure as a whole are quite old, would have already been the tradition that David had written them. So it was like, oh, we should probably put in some of David's writing here. He probably said this at this point, right? Because this psalm is about the ark. Therefore, he probably would have said it at this point.
It makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is supposed to have stripped naked and danced in the street for the ark. So at the very least, he could spin a few lyrics.
Sounds like a poet.
I'm not saying he was drunk. I'm also not saying he wasn't.
David,
there are definitely some psalms that were probably reworked from like older songs of praise for like other gods and other deities. One of the candidates for this, I'm not going to say it's 100% because there is debate over it. Psalm 29, for example, may have started as a hymn to Baal, and then later adapted for use for Yahweh. So that one would have obviously had very early origins, but then you have like something like the Ascension Psalms, which are definitely later in date. So like they span in quite a range.
Right.
How do they date these songs?
It's very hard for most of them because they lack any historical context. But that's where we either look for loan words. We look for motifs that could have been gotten from like specific places, either from Assyria or Babylon or something like that, or like potential references to a war or some other event that we can actually like date. But even then, like it still falls within a range. It just means like after that thing happened, anytime after that.
Right. Yeah. like with New York versus New Amsterdam. Nothing written before the renaming of New Amsterdam to New York would refer to it as New York. So that's always a dead giveaway.
I mean, there's
so
also
stuff
the
like
language,
that.
right?
language, yeah,
Yeah.
like the sometimes like the syntax, right? Like if there is like a certain grammatical construction that only appears in like late biblical Hebrew, then you know it's a later text, as opposed to like uh, earlier biblical Hebrew.
It's so
But
difficult though, because when I look at, say, the hymns we have now, a lot of them have more archaic phrasing, but then there's a rewrite done with more modern language. And, sometimes that's a very good thing. But yeah, it does make the whole thing a bit of a muddle. And I can only imagine it gets worse when you're looking so far back.
Yeah, and also it's possible that writers writing poetry or a psalm would have purposely used older sounding language. So
that is also the case. Yeah, so we have to look for archaized language too.
Okay, so there is that would leave a mark. Okay, that's cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so. In the last chapter, we did read a lot about the singers like Asaph and Haman and stuff. So they're mentioned in Psalms as authors of different psalms, and it also mentions like these musical instruments, which we don't really know what they were exactly, which I mentioned also in the last chapter. It said like, they played the whatever it is and just uses the Hebrew word because we don't actually know exactly what instrument it is, and that probably the chronicler probably just took straight from Psalms as well.
I mean, the Septuagint authors usually do the same thing. They're like, we don't know, so we'll just transliterate it.
Yeah.
But
well, it looked like the Septuagint did it more than it needed to, though.
It did it quite a lot, yeah.
In fairness, I mean, how would you describe a didgeridoo?
Right.
You'd probably just have to transliterate it and be like, I have no fucking clue.
Like, we don't have a word for that stupid thing.
I mean, the Hebrews should have known about didgeridoos, no? Because didn't they use giant 100-meter didgeridoos to lift the rocks to build the pyramids?
Oh, of course, that's right.
Oh, right. Yeah, because sound is magic.
Yeah. Although before we hop into the reading, people should know that not only am I done with my undergrad, which is about fucking time, but because I finally now have like the time to work on things I actually want to work on, I'm I got 2 pages of notes so far, and I can easily condense this into like a 10-15 minute script. I got a few more things to read, but it shouldn't take too long. So either today or tomorrow I'll have this the script done, and then this week y'all are getting a video, and I posted this on Patreon already, but it's about how the Bible got chapters and verses, like how it got the actual numbers.
Nice. Very nice. I look forward to it.
We got a comment, and by the way, congratulations to Lawrence.
Yeah, about fucking
sincerely. Yeah,
Took
we
me
got a
long
comment. Say10616 says Darkmatter2525 made a video on Mango Mussolini's anti-Christian bias policy. I wonder if Aaron would do a video on that. Well, I will, of course, do a video on the anti-Christian bias, but it's not going to be in the same caliber as Darkmatter2525. His was over an hour long, and it was brilliant. So I don't expect to eclipse that at all. Yeah, go check out his video on it when you've got time to listen. All right, shall we begin?
I will play Diablo and put that on.
So, should I read the first chapter? Or was it 16?
Please.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, it's 43 verses. So yeah.
So where should I read to? Till the end?
Yeah, till the end.
Okay. Chapter 16, verse 1. They brought in the ark of God and set it up inside the tent that David had pitched for it, and they sacrificed burnt offerings and offering of well-being before God. When David finished sacrificing the burnt offering and the offerings of well-being, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord. And he distributed to every person in Israel, man and woman alike, to each a loaf of bread, a cake made in a pan, and a raisin cake. He appointed Levites to minister before the ark of the Lord, to invoke, to praise, and to extol the Lord God of Israel. Asaph the chief, Zechariah, second in rank, Yehiel, Shemiramot, Yechiel, Matityahu, Eliav, Benayahu, Oved Edom, and Yehiel, with harps and lyres, and Asaph sounding the cymbals. and Benaiah and Yehaziel, the priests with trumpets, regularly before the ark of the covenant of God. Then on that day, David first commissioned Asaph and his kinsmen to give praise to the Lord. Praise the Lord, call on his name, proclaim his deeds among the peoples. Sing praises unto him, speak of all his wondrous acts, exult in his holy name, let all who seek the Lord rejoice. Turn to the Lord, to his might. Seek his presence constantly. Remember the wonders he has done, his portents, and the judgments he has pronounced. O offspring of Israel, his servant, O descendants of Jacob, his chosen ones, he is the Lord our God. His judgments are throughout the earth. Be ever mindful of his covenant, the promise he gave for a 1,000 generations, that he made with Abraham, swore to Isaac, and confirmed in a decree for Jacob, for Israel as an eternal covenant, saying, to you I will give the land of Canaan as your allotted heritage. You were then few in number, a handful, merely sojourning there, wandering from nation to nation, from one kingdom to another. He allowed no one to oppress them. He reproved kings on their account. Do not touch my anointed ones. Do not harm my prophets. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Proclaim his victory day after day. Tell of his glory among the nations, his wondrous deeds among all peoples. For the Lord is great and much acclaimed. He is held in awe by all divine beings. All the gods of the people are mere idols. But the Lord made the heavens. Glory and majesty are before him. Strength and joy are in his place. Ascribe to the Lord, O families of the peoples. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory of his name. Bring tribute and enter before him. Bow down to the Lord, majestic in holiness. Tremble in his presence, the earth. The world stands firm, it cannot be shaken. Let the heavens rejoice and the earth exult. Let them declare among the nations, the Lord is king. Let the sea and all within it thunder, the fields and everything in them exult. Then shall all the trees of the forest shout for joy at the presence of the Lord, for he is coming to rule the earth. Praise the Lord, for he is good. His steadfast love is eternal. Deliver us, O God, our deliverer, and gather us and save us from the nations, to acclaim your holy name, to glory in your praise. Blessed is the Lord, God of Israel, from eternity to eternity. And all the people said, Amen, and praise the Lord. He left Asaph and his kinsmen there before the ark of the covenant of the Lord to minister before the ark regularly as each day required, as well as Oved Edom with their kinsmen, 68. Also, Oved Edom, son of Yeduthun, and Hoshea, Hossa as gatekeepers. Yeah, Hossa as gatekeepers. Also, Zadok the priest and his fellow priests before the tabernacle of the Lord at the shrine which was in Gibeon, to sacrifice burnt offerings to the Lord on the altar of the burnt offerings regularly, morning and evening, in accordance with what was prescribed in the teachings of the Lord, with which he charged Israel. With them were Heman and Yeduthun, and the other selected men designated by name to give praise to the Lord, for his steadfast love is eternal. Heman and Yeduthun had with them trumpets and cymbals to sound, and instruments for the songs of God, and the sons of Yeduthun were to be at the gate. Then all the people went, every one to his home, and David returned to greet his household. And that's it.
All right. So, on first reading, this shit's boring as fuck. That is undeniable. This shit sucks to read. But there are a few interesting things that we can pull out of the psalm, especially. So it clearly shows the tradition that we get through Genesis, where we have Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, especially. But and then we get the land given to them as an inheritance. But at the same time, we don't have a mention of Moses. Which is interesting, right? Especially if you're talking about the promise of the land. Like we did have that before, like in Genesis, but like it obviously became much more prominent in Exodus. So then who is supposed to be singing? for the people. When it says in verse 24, declare his glory among the nations is a common phrase for the traditional enemies of Israel. Egypt has a phrase like that as well, similar to it. It's called the nine bows. So that's when they talk about the traditional enemies of Egypt, they reference them as the nine bows. And in the Bible, it's the nations. There, you can see a few things as to how late of a text this really is. So not only does it have this universalism to it, but it also has the aniconism associated to it. So in verse 26, for all the gods of the peoples are idols, but the Lord made the heavens. So it shows that later stage of aniconism as well. And this is a pretty common motif that we'll see here when talking about who exalts the Lord, who sings his praises, and especially kind of the language that's used here, like it's almost theophonic in nature. So you have worship the Lord in his holy splendor, tremble before him all the earth. And then what says well, I'll get to that in a second. So when it talks about that imagery of people trembling, and then the sea, let the sea roar, and all that fills it, those are very like the imagery is this is, I would say, this is fairly old imagery. When you have when you have stuff like trees, right, in verse 33, or the heavens themselves singing praises, that is a very common motif that we'll see in Psalms, and not just Psalms. We'll see that throughout all of Hebrew poetry, really. That upon God's appearance or his presence, or with his presence there, that even all these inanimate objects will sing. But this stems from a place, like the language itself stems from even more ancient traditions that did give these things like some sort of spiritual reality. And it's like once you start unpacking this psalm, now like in order to place like an earliest possible date, we need to go to the latest possible things in here. So that would be something like the aniconism. So it would not be an early psalm. It's clearly a later one because it's taking up motifs from a later period.
Something about the concept of religion that I don't know how to relate to at all is, my imaginary friend is so wonderful. Let me extol how much I love and all the great things about my imaginary friend. I don't get it. The whole notion of worshiping.
It's a fawn response. Do you remember fight, flight, or freeze? It's a danger response. Fawn is the unspoken fourth response. This type of worship began at a time when we were just coming off of total barbarism, and rulers were absolute and frankly brutal. You had to kiss their ass to live, and you did it because they were the only thing standing between you and total chaos, or they had convinced you that they were. There's this idea, which you see reflected down through the ages with the divine right of kings, that authority is not just something, as the Enlightenment pointed out, derived from the people, but that it is some divine order, that nature itself is in accord with this authority. And all sorts of magical stories are told about people who, because of their sacredness in God, lions would not eat them and tigers would not devour them, and nature itself would sort of lightly bend towards them. That's the idea of, if you have enough faith, you can tell this mountain, go and yada, yada, yada. The thing is, though, of course, where it gets even more perverted is that God is meant to be a God of love. And as Christianity grows into it, you have to love him. You can't just say you love him. He knows if you really feel it. So you end up all tied up in your own head. And it's just, it's an exhausting relationship to maintain because you have to maintain both sides of it. But keeping you engaged with all that energy keeps you from noticing that this is exhausting. You're not getting any rewards out of it except sort of emotional ecstasies that you sort of contrive yourself. And yeah, it's exhausting.
I mean, that's just one aspect of the religion that I don't get. But I mean, the way that people sing praises to this thing, you can't even see. Our God is an awesome God. He made no. You're just making assertions. That's all it is.
Well, that's what worship is supposed to be. It's the closest they're allowed to fun. It's the closest they're allowed to fun. It's the only time they're allowed to have fun and sing and enjoy God is when they sing the praise and worship songs. So yeah, they're going to turn off their brains because it's fucking exhausting and they just need to go with the vibe.
Okay. We don't do that. We don't sing the psalms or hymns or anything like that. There's parts of prayers that we sing, but that's about it.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. It's almost like a slight form of, or a minor form of like Stockholm syndrome, where you like,
100%.
There's nothing I can do about it. This person has control over my life, and then you kind of thank them for that control.
The mind finds a way to, survive. And honestly, as an adult, I look at it and I think the closest thing I could compare it to would be like absolute control BDSM dynamics, but with no consent, no safe words, none of the ethical parts of that, and no problem imposing it on children. Yeah. Congratulations. Welcome to Christianity. It's abuse.
I mean, also,
fancy.
Yeah. I mean, if you go to church as a child and everyone's singing "Our God is an awesome God" or whatever it is they sing, like that is going to have an effect on a child as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, it depends on how smart the child is and how committed they are to the doctrine. But if the child is smart enough to figure out that the death of Christ means nothing unless you first believe it should have been you before they've ever done anything worse than say, no, I didn't steal the cake, that'll fuck you right up.
Well, I mean, obviously, like, I don't know what you would call it, divine selection on which religions do well and which ones don't.
Yeah. God is a fuck.
Divine selection is definitely not the right word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, obviously, Christianity won because God favored it, not because they burned heretics.
All right. Okay, one thing I wanted to mention about this chapter that I find very interesting is verse 30, which technically it's about the psalm that it's taken from, but this verse from the psalm is taken by a lot of people as, I don't know if you would call it evidence or proof, but kind of like, see, the Bible says that the earth doesn't move, and so it's taken as a biblical argument against like heliocentrism. So obviously, like flat earthers will use it as well, but even you do have a lot of religious people who reject flat earth ideas. They'll agree with globe and everything, but they'll claim that the earth is the center of the universe, and somehow that's still because of general relativity or something.
And this is the problem with taking religious ideas literally. If you think about, going into a state of spiritual realization and feeling at one with the world, and it seems like nature bends to you and you bend to it, and it's like, basically you just got high and thought about your place in the universe, then all of these things could kind of be said in that sense, not literally, obviously, but, in the sense of one's personal experience. And that could be trippy, but fun. But then you have to try and pretend it's really real. And then you end up with geocentrists. And then we end up with Cool Hard Logic making hilarious videos about geocentrism.
Yeah. Go watch those videos. So funny. All of them. So it's interesting because even if you just read it from like a basic perspective of like what this psalm is trying to say, it's not talking about the earth stands still. It's just saying, tremble in his presence, all the earth. The world stands firm; it cannot be shaken. You could also translate it as like God establishes the earth forever. It's almost like a reassurance of, things might be bad, but the
It
world will
sounds like they're
continue
trying
on,
to
sort of thing.
invoke protection against earthquakes, honestly, which is
Yeah,
valid. I don't
right.
want
Even
to
if the earth is shaking and things are destroyed, like the it's not the end of the world. I think that's kind of, I mean,
but the word of the Lord stands forever. Yeah, I heard that one.
when a flesh and blood kings, yeah, pretty much that, that God will kind of take care of things. That's kind of what it's saying. But to then go and say, no, this is referring physically to the earth, and then it doesn't move through space, it's not like them being literalist. It's almost
There's no
like,
ether. It's not even a meaningful statement.
Hey, what's the word for world there?
Tevel.
oh, Tevel.
Oh yeah,
David.
okay. So I think that so the way that one pops up quite a lot actually is as part of a tripartite structure of the universe. So hold on. God, where did I write this down? It often appears with Eretz and Shamim.
Yeah.
So it often appears with
Shemayim.
yeah, sorry. Oh, my bad. So it would be the heavens and the in many cases Eretz can refer to the underworld. But then this would refer to the actual habitable world.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah. So in this verse, there's two verses here, right? So you have tremble in his presence, all the earth, Eretz,
Yeah.
earth, land. The world stands firm. So world is Tevel. It cannot be shaken. It cannot be moved. Let the heavens rejoice, Shemayim, the heavens, and also the earth, Eretz again. The earth exalts.
Yeah.
And then you get the sea and blah blah blah. So
yeah, something like
the
earthquakes
inhabitable world makes sense
it would
as well.
feel comforting to feel like there's something underneath that stays solid, I guess, or well, not.
But you're saying
Yeah.
the earth is bigger than Tevel. You think Tevel would refer more to where people live, or the other way around?
No, I think that Tevel would refer to like the actual like this physical plane, right? But then
Eretz
Oh, we're
is
talking
the
about-
land.
it can refer to the underworld.
Okay.
But it can also, but obviously, like Eretz has other meanings, right? Like earth, like the actual earth, like the physical like ground that we stand on, not just the land of the living. And then there is like the actual underworld, right? And that would be different from Sheol, which would just be the pit, right? Or the grave. So there, and the thing is, like some of these meanings over time do kind of become jumbled. But there was I forget who made the argument. I'd have to look back into my notes. But I mean the tripartite structure is very common. And I do have a video on that.
Heavens above and the earth below, and the deeps beneath, and it's interesting too.
The water above the firmament.
Yeah, that too.
And the water beneath the firmament. It's interesting too, because I think about it. It's one of the ways that it's relevant to date what they're talking about, because poetic language, what model of the universe are we going with? The layered heavens that increase in perfection? Are we doing the the above, below, heaven, earth, deeps? Are we talking about the tabletop earth, or is that like not really part of the view? But then also poets use old ideas for beautiful poetic effect. John Donne's dull sublunary lover's love, whose soul is sense, cannot have been absence, because it doth remove those things which elemented it. It doesn't mean he literally believed in like Dante's Paradiso with the tiered heavens and the one under the moon was the least perfect, but it's a beautiful poetic idea with lots of connections in literature. And when you're just hitting on a woman, you're going for pretty over scientifically accurate.
Yes, I mean very early on, when like you could argue that, say, the Greek philosophers or the scientists of the day, and the let's say the Jewish people who are in Babylonia or in Egypt, or they would have seen the Greek philosophies as like the wise men of the nations, even then they already had known that the earth was round. They already were arguing like the Bible doesn't agree with that almost. So they didn't seem to think that this made a big difference to their model, and they kind of kept it for quite a while, I think.
Yeah.
The Talmud kind of mentions like the argument. I think I've mentioned it before, how like, oh, the wise men of the nations, the Greeks, they say that the sun goes below the earth at night rather than above the firmament. And how do I know how do I know they're right and we're wrong? Because at night the waters of the springs are warm. So it must be that the sun is underneath them.
Oh, that's one way you use hot
right,
springs.
but in the wrong way, you know?
Yeah, totally. Oh my God. And that's, again, the thing. Poetry, things that would be true from a personal experience kind of view, and trying to articulate that. Fine. If you take religion like that, lots of them are actually kind of useful for that personal vibe thing. But just stop trying to make the external world conform to what someone in a poetic fit said 4,000 years ago. Okay? It's just, it's not even like square peg, round hole. It's butterfly.
I like the argument of you can say to a religious person, like, the Bible, you think the Bible was written by men who had divine inspiration, right? God didn't physically write the Bible. It was written by men with God's divine inspiration or whatever, right? But the earth, the physical world, was actually, according to you, was created by God himself without any intervention, without anyone in between. So the earth, the reality, should be more holy in a sense than the Bible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
What the world says is what God created, and what the book says is what
God men have said about their experience with what God created, which, again, poetry is beautiful. I fucking love poetry. Do you know how much John Donne I can quote at the drop of a hat? And not just him. But I don't get my science from Keats or Shelley or any of the other poets. Maybe a little bit Great and Squared.
It's something to think about.
Okay. There are some comments, Aaron.
Berthausen offers $5. It says, congrats to Lawrence. And then we got a super sticker from, well, I don't know where this one comes from because it's not linked in here.
Puggles, I think.
Puggles.
Okay, thank you, Puggles. And then God says, that Y dog sure is full of himself.
What?
What's a Y dog? Is that like the opposite of a sausage dog?
I
asked, Y dog is Yahweh.
Okay, I know it's.
Okay, yeah. So it's like a rap reference. Yeah, like a rap reference, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's hip and cool.
Y dog. Little Y.
No, Jesus would be little Y.
Yeah, Jesus would be little Y. I don't think he's got as much riz as little Bow Wow.
Do we have any commentary on this?
Of course. I have 20 pages of commentary.
Jesus and the beloved disciple.
Oh, for fuck's sake. You are a sadist. You are a sadist, Homer. I know it. You are a sadist.
No, maybe more of a masochist, but no.
Yeah, you're dragging all of us into your sadomasochism. Just get someone to spank you and stop torturing you with something. Better be something interesting in that commentary.
Yeah, don't worry. I try to limit myself to 5 pages for Chronicles because although I do enjoy Lawrence suffering, I don't want him to suffer that much.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
I will make
so I'll start on verse 1. They presented burnt off. Oh, sorry. Should first note that verses 1 through 3 are parallel with 2 Samuel 6, 17 through 19. So on verse 1, they presented burnt offerings. According to 2 Samuel 6:17, David sacrificed the offerings. Japhet notes that some scholars explain this change as the chronicler's disdain from David's description as the one who offers sacrifices. She notes, however, that the next verse contradicts this claim, fully corresponding to 2 Samuel 6:18, when David finished sacrificing the burnt offerings. She writes that more likely, the chronicler interpreted these statements as referring to David only as the person who authorized the offerings and on whose behalf they were offered. Thus, the change from the singular to the plural is to include the people. The burnt sacrifices were not just offered in the name of David, but in the name of the entire people.
I mean, the idea that only the priests should be bringing sacrifices and the king shouldn't be allowed to do it as well makes sense that would be a later idea. And
Yeah.
retro, I don't know what the word is.
Retrofitting.
Okay. On verses 4 through 6, Japhet comments, quote, the arrangement of playing and singing before the ark is not recorded in 2 Samuel 6. There, the story ends attractively with the departure of the people to their houses at the end of the celebrations. However, the conclusion of the narrative in 2 Samuel 6 seems incomplete from a historical point of view. It is difficult to imagine that David merely placed the ark in its tent and thereafter forgot all about it. Some kind of cultic activity, not to mention a permanent guard, had undoubtedly to be established at the place. While the book of Samuel ignores this aspect of the story, Chronicles greatly elaborates it. The actual cultic details suggested by the chronicler may very well be anachronistic, reflecting his own time and views. Yet the historical standpoint reveals a concept compatible with historical writing and an appropriate appreciation for the topics and matters which should be incorporated into a historiographical work.
So it's a case of they didn't write anything that they did for these elements, but they must have done X, Y, Z because of course they would. So I'll just fill it in here for them. Aren't I nice?
Okay, on 8 through 36, these verses are a combination of different psalms. Verses 8 through 22 are parallel with Psalms 105, 1 through 15, verses 23 through 33 with Psalms 96, and verses 34 through 36 with Psalms 106 verses 147 and 48. Knoppers notes that recent studies have shown that the poetry in verses 8 through 36 is not a collage of disconnected pieces, but, quote, a skillful and artfully arranged composition, end quote. Klein notes that Noth suggested that verses 5 through 38 and 41 through 42 were secondary to the work of the chronicler, with verses 7 through 36 added later than the other versions. And Rudolph proposed a complicated series of additions, with verses 7 through 37 being the last. Dirksen, however, writes that there is no reason to deny this psalm to the chronicler, since it links up thematically both with the immediate context and with Chronicles as a whole. Likewise, Japhet writes that several considerations suggest that the chronicler was not only responsible for placing the psalm in its current context, but also for its composition. She writes, quote, the most striking feature is the fundamental similarity in method between the compilation of the psalm and the general character of the chronicler's literary activity. The joining, editing, and reworking of existing materials into a new, extensive literary composition. This is not only a stylistic feature, according to Childs, but a mode of literary creativity. However, the chronistic authorship of the psalm is expressed in two more specific features. On the one hand, the exact adaptation of the psalm to the historical context immediately presupposed, and on the other hand, its conformity with the chronicler's theological and historical views. End quote. On 8 through 22, these verses are parallel with Psalms 105, 1 through 15. The rest of the psalm deals with the story of Joseph, Moses and the Exodus, the wilderness wandering, and the conquest. Klein notes that these themes are virtually ignored throughout Chronicles and asks if such themes appeared too revolutionary, quote-unquote, to the chronicler. He writes that by quoting... He writes that by quoting Psalms 105, 1 through 15, the chronicler was drawing a comparison between the small post-exilic community and the few but well-protected ancestors of Israel. Likewise, Japhet emphasized that the chronicler downplays the breaks in the habitation of the land between the patriarchs and the monarchy during the exile.
Well, it's not just that. There was the line, he did not let them be abused, the people, for the sake of his promise. And I'm like, all the history we have read thus far has been his people being abused with brief breakouts.
You could argue that it's referring only to the patriarchs themselves, but yeah.
Yeah, sure. I've read their life stories, and sure, Jan.
Okay, so sorry, somebody said
Wise
Discord
words.
is no, it was turned on and it added me. Oh,
Americans are very can I say this? Americans are very uptight about drugs.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
who is?
If I didn't have
It's a
errands to
freaking
run, I would be
dealer.
high.
Yeah. Okay. So on verse 13, "O ye seed of Israel, his servant," I'm reading the KJV. Psalms 105:6 reads, "O offspring of Abraham, his servant." A reading attested in Peshitta. Kimchi writes that the text in Psalms refers to the offspring of Israel, since, quote, "whereas Abraham had other offspring, the offspring of Israel consists of us specifically. When it says offspring of Abraham, it thus refers to the offspring of Israel," end quote. Japhet writes that according to the chronicler's viewpoint, the Israelites are not the distant heirs of Abraham, but the direct offspring of the patriarch Israel or Jacob. Klein notes that Rudolph proposed that the term Abraham was avoided here because it would include non-Israelites such as Ishmael. However, the chronicler employs the name Abraham in verse 16 and refers to the seed of Abraham in 2 Chronicles 27. Instead, quote, the chronicler's change of his vorlage focuses the exhortation on the faithful community, Israel, whereas the vorlage in Psalms 105 itself refers to those genealogically descended from the two different ancestors, end quote. On 22 through 33, these verses are parallel with Psalms 96. Knoppers notes that this psalm has been ascribed as, quote, "a cultic liturgy appointed for the celebration of the enthronement of Yahweh," end quote, according to Weiser. He notes that the form and content of Psalms 96 are quite different from Psalms 105 and 106, which focus their comments on events in Israel's past and address the history of the relationship between Yahweh and the people of Israel. Psalms 96 addresses the relationship between the universal, creation, divine sovereignty, the nations, and the worship of one particular deity at his sanctuary. The psalm, quote, "celebrates Yahweh's majesty and splendor in the heavens and beckons not only its Israelite audience, but also the nations to give homage to Israel's creator God," end quote. Thus, quote, "the themes of Psalms 96 are appropriate to the chronicler's use, since the psalm describes how Israel, the land, and the nations are to respond to Yahweh's kingship, sovereignty, and glory by giving thanks and worshiping the one majestic in holiness," quote unquote, in verse 29.
So that's a good point that he brought up about the enthronement stuff. And that's something I forgot to mention. So in Canaanite tradition, especially, when the gods are said to be giving glory to another god, that is the god's enthronement scene. That is when the god is taking over. So the stuff about like in these verses about like declare his glory among the nations, and it goes on to say honor and majesty are before him, strength and joy are his place. This takes up that old enthronement language that we see, and it pops up in the Psalms proper too. But yes, that is an important note that this kind of language is taken from enthronement theology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, on 27, strength and joy are in his dwelling place. Masoretic text reads, "Oz v'chedva b'mikomo." Psalms 96:6 reads, "Oz v'tiferet b'mikdasho," which means strength and splendor are in his temple. Japhet writes that the difference between the versions stems from the different context and the assumed situation. In the present context, the psalm is set during David's time, when the ark is brought to its place in the tent which David established for it, whilst the temple was not yet created. Thus, the verse in Chronicles refers to his place, in Hebrew mekomo, rather than his temple, mikdasho, and splendor, tiferet, is not a fitting description of the tent. On 29, come before him. Psalms 96:8 reads, come into his courts, in Hebrew, bo lechatzarotav. Klein writes that the chronicler changed his courts to before him to avoid the anachronism of inviting people at the time of David to worship in the temple that was first erected by Solomon. Selman, however, writes that they may reflect the language of the context. The ark's place, quote-unquote, has already been prepared in 15:1 and 3, while the repeated phrase before God or Yahweh or him in verses 1, 27, and 33 is closely associated with the worship that took place before the ark in verses 4, 6, and 37. On verse 30, the chronicler omits Psalms 96:10b. He judges the peoples with equity, in Hebrew, yadin amim b'meisharim. Dirksen writes that the reason for the omission is unclear, but that it is unlikely to be due to the mention of God's judgment. He writes, quote, though Psalms 96:13c, which likewise talks about God's judgment upon the world, has also been omitted, verse 13a, he comes to judge the earth, has been retained in verse 33b. The form vatikon, nif'al of kaf vav nun, occurs only in Psalms 93:1, 96:10, in relation to the earth. Some scholars believe that the original reading in these two verses may have been tikhan, but in that case, too, we can assume that the reading in Chronicles was adopted in this form from Psalms 96, so that there is no reason for emendation.
It's actually kind of interesting to think about. From a standpoint of, okay, so if we were to go to the chronicler right now, do you think they would think that these are the oldest psalms? Like, do you think that the reason they included these as part of David's psalm here is because they believed that those were the oldest ones?
This specific psalm, like 22 to 33?
No, these sections, right? Like all the ones that they
Yeah.
quote from. Like, do you
Yeah.
think that it's possible that they thought that those were the oldest, and that is why they included them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
That's
think
just-
so. I mean,
it's an
I've already
interesting thing to
noted.
think about.
I mean, I've already noted that Psalms suggest that this entire section is from the chronicler. Like,
Oh, okay, yeah.
So. Okay, so on 34 to 36, these verses are parallel to Psalms 106, verses 1, 47, and 48. Knoppers summarizes Psalms 106 as a long historical review, lamenting Israelite behaviors during the Exodus, the wilderness period, and the conquest and settlement period. He notes that sections of the author's negative rehearsal of the past have been compared with Deuteronomistic works in their choices of events and themes, if not in their language. But familiarity with some traditions found in the priestly work, as we see in Numbers 11, 13, and 14, and 16, etc., also seems to be presupposed. He notes that the end of the psalm, verses 47 and 48, finds the people of Israel scattered throughout the lands, imploring Yahweh to gather them to glory in your praise, quote-unquote. Thus, commentators generally consider the work to be a Neo-Babylonian or Second Temple period composition. On 38, Obed Edom, son of Yeduthun. This is the only case in which Obed Edom is given a patronymic, and it is unexpected, since Yeduthun is usually presented as a singer, as we see in 25 verses 1, 3, and 6, 2 Chronicles 5:12, 29:14, and 35:15. Knoppers notes that Yeduthun functions as a singer at the Gibeon cultus in verse 41, and the superscriptions in Psalms 39, 62, and 77:1 also seem to associate Yeduthun with song, although some take Yeduthun in this context to be a liturgical or musical term. Although some scholars, like Curtis and Madsen, Rudolph and Dirksen, delete the text as a gloss, he writes that there is another association between Yeduthun and the gatekeepers. Quote, in staffing the cultus of the tabernacle at Gibon, the sons of Yeduthun serve at the gate in 1642. In some reconstructions, for example Dirksen, this later reference is also viewed as a gloss. End quote. On 42, that's the final comment, the reference to Heman and Yeduthun, found also in the Oceanic Recension, is absent from the Septuagint. Several scholars, like Knoppers and Klein, take the Masoretic text reading to be the result of dittography with verse 41. Dirksen adds that the verse is problematic otherwise too. Quote, that Levites would blow trumpets is at odds with verse 6 and what is said elsewhere about the blowing of trumpets in Chronicles, in 2 Chronicles 5:12 and 29:26, and in the Old Testament, Numbers 10:8. Numbers 10:8. Klein thinks that storage of the trumpets may be meant, but the preposition im is not used in this sense. Nowhere else is the safekeeping of trumpets and cymbals regarded as a task of the Levites. And moreover, which trumpets are concerned. The only explanation, it seems, is to see the verse as a gloss, by which a later hand wanted to assign trumpets to Gibeon too. This idea is reinforced by the ending. Here too we are dealing with an account of affairs which does not occur elsewhere in the Old Testament. The connection of Yeduthun's offspring with the office of the gatekeeper. We can assume that this is a later addition by which Yeduthunite gatekeepers are also assigned to Gibeon. It thus seems likely that the gloss in verse 38 and the entire verse 42 are by the same hand.
There was one other thing about this chapter. It seemed to imply that David took the ark, put it in the tent somewhere, and then he had people appointed to look after it or whatever. But then he also appoints singers or whatever to Gibeon, where the rest of the tabernacle is. So like the ark was separated from the tabernacle.
Yes, why wouldn't you just move the tabernacle with it? And why is it not clearly laid out? I mean, that's the whole point of the tabernacle, is to follow around the ark and be a portable temple.
It seems to be like, it's almost like the place of he didn't want to move the place of sacrifice. But he did want, but yeah, that seems to be. But I don't remember that being the implication in like in Samuel or whatever, or Kings. I think over there it seems to imply that everything was moved together. But I mean, I guess the ark was missing from the tabernacle for a while already, so there's no I guess there's no need to bring them together until they had established a place for it. Oh, well.
I suppose so.
Are we done with Tomer's commentary?
No, because we have
Christians.
I do have a single Christian, and that and that is Origen, who says that as there are many antichrists in the world, in the same way, knowing that Christ has come, we see that there are many Christs in the world who, like him, love righteousness and iniquity.
There are many Christs in the world.
Yes.
And they love righteousness and iniquity?
Yes.
So we know that Christ is come, and by know we mean pretend, as in lie. When you take a belief and treat it as knowledge, that's a lie.
Remember
what?
Remember that Christ is a translation of Messiah, and there were many Messiahs.
Anointed one.
And what are they all saving us from?
Sorry, what?
What are they all saving us from?
Oh, God.
It sounds a bit like the sort of like Jewish mystical tradition of the 39 hidden righteous men. Like every generation there's 39 righteous men that like live in incognito, like, and like whenever you hear like a story of like the simple person who would be like, who would say psalms all day or whatever. They'll be like, oh, maybe. And when he would die, suddenly loads of random people would come to his funeral or something. They'll be like, oh, he was one of the hidden Sadiqim. I'm sure.
Okay, so there are many Christs.
Yeah.
We know that Christ has come, but there are many Christs, so he's just one out of a bunch.
Well,
guess.
you know,
Let's be clear here. The Christian theology would have him be the pre-existing logos that would become Christ. But the idea of the anointed one, or an anointed one, is everywhere.
Cyrus.
Cyrus is even, like, the Persian king is even called a Christ. In Greek, he's called Christos, like, because he viewed him, he was an anointed one.
Yeah,
because he sent the people back.
Yeah, I mean the kings. I mean in Christendom, like the kings of England, kings of the Christian countries, they would be anointed during their coronation.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Okay, Tomer.
So you're saying that there are also Christian subs?
The Mormons, I guess.
I guess. Oh yeah. So I'm done.
Oh, you're going to jail.
And they're sub-Christian.
Did you say you're done, Tomer?
Yes, I'm done.
Okay. All right. So let's move. Where was? Did I just close? No, here it is. All right. So moving
17.
to 1 Chronicles 17.
Yeah.
God's covenant with David. Now, when David settled in his house, David said to the prophet Nathan, I am living in a house of cedar. But the Ark of the Covenant, and why is he living in the house of cedar? Because the big bad wolf blew down his house of straw. Sorry. I am living in a house of cedar, but the Ark of the Covenant is under a tent. Nathan said to David, do all you have in mind, for God is with you. But that same night, the word of God came to Nathan. I have questions about this, saying, and go and tell my servant David, thus says the Lord, you shall not build me a house to live in, for I have not lived in a house since the day I brought out Israel to this very day. But I have lived in a tent and in a tabernacle. Wherever I have moved about among all Israel, did I ever speak a word with any of the judges of Israel, whom I commanded to shepherd my people, saying, why have you not built me a house of cedar? Now, therefore, thus you shall say to my servant David, thus says the Lord of hosts, I took you from the pasture, from following the sheep, to be ruler over the people Israel. And I have been with you wherever you went, and cut off all of your enemies before you. And did you know? I'm sorry. And I will make for you a name like the name of the great ones of earth. I will appoint a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, so they may live in their own place and be disturbed no more. And evildoers shall wear them down no more as they did formerly. From the time that I appointed judges over my people Israel, and I will subdue all your enemies. Moreover, I declare to you that the Lord will build you a house when your days are fulfilled to go be with your ancestors. I will raise up your offspring after you, one of your sons, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for me, and I will establish his throne forever. I will be father to him, and he shall be a son to me, and I will not take my steadfast love from him as I took it from him who was before you, but I will confirm him in my house and in my kingdom forever, and his throne shall be established forever. In accordance with all these words and this vision, Nathan spoke to David.
For all time being, until his son is a little entitled shit.
Yeah. And I won't do this thing I'm going to do. It's going to be just like all these things I never did to you.
Mm-hmm.
Then King David went in and sat before the Lord and said, who am I, O Lord God, and what is my house that you have brought me thus far? And even this was a small thing in your sight. O God, you have also spoken of your servant's house into the distant future. You regard me as someone of high rank. O Lord God. And what more can David say to you, honoring your servant? You know your servant's sake, O Lord, and according to your own heart, you have done all these great things, these great deeds, making known all these great things. There is no one like you, O Lord, and there is no God besides you, according to all that we have heard with our ears. Who is like your people Israel? One nation on the earth whom God went to redeem to his people, making for yourself a name for great and awesome things, and driving out nations before your people, whom you redeemed from Egypt. And you made your people Israel to be your people forever. And you, O Lord, became their God. And now, O Lord, as for the word that you have spoken concerning your servant and concerning his house, let it be established forever. And do as you promised. Thus your name will be established and magnified forever in saying, the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, is Israel's God. And the house of your servant David will be established in your presence. Israel's God will be the God of Israel. How profound. For you, my God, have revealed to your servant that you will build a house for him. Therefore, your servant has found it possible to pray before you. And now, O Lord, you are God, and you have promised this good thing to your servant. Therefore, may it please you to bless the house of your servant so that it may continue forever before you. For you, O Lord, have blessed and are blessed forever. God is blessed. God is magically enchanted. So David just magically enchanted God.
Well, he's sucking up to him because he actually wants all the blessings for his house and lineage. And the best way to get them is to connect the keeping of that promise with God's ego. Because if there's one thing God is not under-equipped in, it's the ego department.
Yeah, and so when God says that, you go wage war against these people and I will deliver them into your hands, what it means is that when you enter the battlefield, it's not that those people just fall down dead because God did a damn thing. No, you have to go kill all those people. That's what it means for God to deliver them into your hand. Much like God will build you a house. God doesn't actually do shit. Your slaves and your servants go build you the house, and that's how God delivers that house to you. You go do it yourself, and then
in this case, he's referring to the house of his lineage. I will build you descendants who will reign forever and ever, or until I don't like them anymore. But
that this writing about the descendants before it happens was written after it happened.
Well, yes, unless you feel like if you don't affirm that it's prophecy, then you're a worthless, horrible person who will burn in hell. Then you might not be willing to consider that obvious possibility.
Okay, so I've got a comment here. I'm going to read a question from Jamnik06. Which version of the Bible are they reading?
I think most of us are reading from different ones. I think Aaron as well are reading from the NRSV UE.
Yep.
And
I read from the JPS 1985 version.
Me too. I read from JPS 1985.
And Lilith, what do you usually read from? I know you have your.
Today I have.
The
duct tape Bible is an NIV. I also have an American Standard Version, of course, and KJV, because who doesn't? And honestly, a handful of others. So I can pick and choose.
Yeah.
But
if you want to hear KJV language on this channel, go watch the Book of Mormon series.
Behold.
I think the beautiful part about this show, obviously, is that we have two people here who can actually read the Hebrew, and I can read the Greek. So we also look at the Masoretic text itself and other variations of it, and the Septuagint, and the variations of it. So, yeah, we read not just the English ones, but also the ancient language ones.
And then My Unfinished Journey offers $2.22. It says, "Hail Nero, Aaron and company, and hail God's tallywhacker."
Oh, I swear, I hate to say it, but Americans do need this bit of advice. When you have a psychopathic narcissist in charge of things, the only way to get him to do anything, good or evil, is to appeal to his ego, because it's a fragile little thing, and he has to be told he is the biggest and the bestest and the strongest. Yes, he is. And that's the only way you're going to get anything out of that dumbass motherfucker.
One more comment from my unfinished sock. Always makes me laugh. Don't misspell tabernacle. Like and share the stream instead.
There are, I would say, a few interesting things about this chapter. So if we remember in 2 Samuel 7, we have the dynastic promise. This one is a little bit different. So in this one, the covenant is about I will establish your house, and also Solomon is going to build my actual house, the actual temple. And in 2 Samuel 7, the family of David is the one that is going to establish. He says here, the family of David is the one that's going to be on the throne forever. But here, in verse 12, when talking about Solomon, he says, "He shall build the house for me, and I will establish his throne forever." So it takes a Solomonic approach over a Davidic one for the same promise, essentially.
Which is easy to overlook, since Solomon is his heir.
Right. Exactly.
And son.
But it cuts off a whole other part of the family. And furthermore, what was interesting to me was in verse 16, then King David went in and sat before the Lord. And then he started talking to him, right? This thing, I've argued for this before. I know that they're talking about the ark, right? But this is also language they use for statues. So when you use it before the statue. So this is that's interesting to me, at least.
Fair enough.
And for any of those wondering, you can see a full argument for that in Thomas Romer's The Invention of God.
The Invention of God.
Yeah. He has very what's the word I'm looking for? Very you call it clickbaity titles.
Yeah.
But it is a very good read.
I mean, I've read about the evolution of God, the history of God, the body of God. So it's very interesting to see, because it's a complex process, like anything that develops. And so there are so many different ways to look into it and gain insight. Absolutely none of which involve magic talking animals.
Okay, so maybe you should read some. Have you read any other comments, Soren?
No, I don't see any more.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tomer.
So I'll start on verse 1. This is parallel with 2 Samuel 7. 2 Samuel 7 1b does not appear in this chapter, quote, "And the Lord had granted him safety from all the enemies around him," end quote. The exact reason for this omission is unclear. Several scholars suggested that the omission was deliberate. Klein notes that 2 Samuel 7 1b is a Deuteronomistic observation, and according to Deuteronomy 12 9 through 11, Israel was to go to the place that Yahweh has chosen when they had been given rest from their enemies. He suggests that the chronicler's omission may have been caused in part by the sensitivity to the wars that follow in chapters 18 through 20, although that didn't bother D.H., who records the same wars right after this chapter in 2 Samuel 8 1 through 18, 10 1 through 19, and 11 1 and 2. Japhet notes that in Samuel, David reaches the conclusion that it is time to build a permanent place for Yahweh's worship based on Deuteronomy 12. But for the chronicler, the rest, quote unquote, the early necessary condition for the building of the temple was fulfilled during Solomon's times in 22:9. Thus, for the chronicler, the mention of the rest in 2 Samuel does not fit David's period, and so it was omitted. While this view is also shared by Dirksen and Selman, Knoppers writes that haplography cannot be ruled out.
I swear, Ingersoll got it right. the Bible is apparently from his own hand an account of how God made endless promises to Israel and broke them all. He broke every promise he ever made to them. He never said a thing and followed through. Never once.
Okay, so on verse 4, you are not the one to build me a house to dwell in. 2 Samuel 7:5 reads, are you the one to build a house for me to dwell in? Klein comments, quote, while 2 Samuel 7:5 expressed this oracle in a rhetorical question, the difference between it and the wording in Chronicles may not be as great as often assumed. The Samuel reading is not necessarily a categorical rejection of the temple building, but only questioning whether David should be the one to build it. The issue for the chronicler is also a matter of timing. The promised rest has not yet been achieved. David himself is not to be the actual builder, as both this indicative prohibition and verse 12 make clear. Yahweh did not question the building of the temple itself, but only whether David was the person to do it. The emphasis given to the pronoun you by its location at the beginning of this clause is to be compared with the emphasis on I, referring to Yahweh, in verse 7. The addition of the definite article to the word house may be the chronicler's attempt to emphasize that it is a question of building not a temple, but the temple that was in Jerusalem. This initial deferral until the next generation of David's proposal to build a temple will be followed by a blessing on his house, or seed, in verses 11 through 14.
That's not messed up at all.
On verse 6, their leaders. The Masoretic text reads, Shoftei Israel, literally, the judges of Israel. This is one of two references to the judges in Chronicles, also verse 10. Japhet notes that in general, there are very few references in Chronicles to pre-monarchical times, being presented by Samuel in 26:28 and 2 Chronicles 35:18. The reference to the judges appears in Nathan's prophecy as well. She writes that this is, quote, a clear example of the problematics of the historiography based on ready-made building blocks rather than on the raw material of original composition, and of the working of divergent tendencies within one worldview, end quote. 2 Samuel 7:7 reads, tribes of Israel, in Hebrew, Shivtei Israel, and Septuagint, one tribe of Israel, in Hebrew, Shevet Israel. On verse 9, will not oppress them anymore. Hebrew for oppress is levalto. Let me just check real quick. That was 9. Yeah, levalto. Yeah, levalto from the root bet lamed hey, to wear it out. 2 Samuel 7:10 reads, not oppress them, la'anoto. Japhet argues that the root does not fit the context and takes the Chronicles reading to be corrupt. She notes that Chazal already attested to it. Quote, Rav Huna said Rav Huna raised the contradiction to afflict them in 2 Samuel 7:7, while in the parallel verse in Chronicles it is written to destroy them, in Hebrew, lechaloto. The Gemara resolves this contradiction. The enemies of Israel intend first to afflict them and ultimately to destroy them entirely, end quote. Traditionals also read lechaloto. She suggests that originally the Chronicles reading was lechaloto, which was corrupted to levaloto with the interchange of bet and chaf. And I forgot to mention where the quote is from. Where was it? That was in Talmud Berachot 7b.
So they were saying that the text had changed, or they were saying that you could read it in both ways, sort of thing.
No, they read lechaloto instead of levaloto.
Right. Okay. So maybe the version that they had access to had it written that way.
I mean, it could be. Let me just check real quick. Yeah. To humble them, but yeah. Okay. So on verse 10, I will also subdue your enemies. Hebrew for subdue is vehechnati. 2 Samuel 7:11 reads, I will give you safety, vahanichoti, from all your enemies. The Samuel reading is attested in Peshitta. Knoppers writes that the wording of the Samuel version reflects Deuteronomistic editing, whilst the use of the verb chaf nun ein is typical of the chronicler, as was seen in 24, 2 Chronicles 7:14, 12:6, and 12, etc. Klein writes that the chronicler may also have chosen this verb in anticipation of the battles fought by David just ahead in chapters 18 through 20. On verse 12, he is the one who will build a house for me. 2 Samuel 7:13 reads, he shall build a house for my name, which Klein takes as a Deuteronomistic cliché. He writes that the change in Chronicles creates a closer literary relationship between he and for me. Solomon's temple building leads to the divine dynastic promise in the second half of the verse. And Selman comments, quote, although the Old Testament often refers to Yahweh as king, for example in Exodus 15:18, Isaiah 6:5, Psalms 47:3, and 99:2, only rarely and almost entirely in Psalms, Chronicles, and Daniel does it specifically mention Yahweh's kingdom, as was seen in Psalms 45:6, 103:19, 145 verses 14 through 13. It is only Chronicles, however, and possibly Psalms 45:6, which sees the kingdom of God expressed directly in the Davidic kingdom. This is a significant contribution to the development of the idea of the kingdom of God, especially in the light of the Gospel's understanding of the revelation of the kingdom in the person of David's son Jesus. For example, Matthew 12:28, Luke 12:32, and 17:20 and 21. On 13, I will never take my love away from him, so I took it away from your predecessor. 2 Samuel 7:14 has the addition, when he does wrong, I will chastise him with the rod of men and the affliction of mortals. Dirksen notes the various proposals for the omission. Quote, the writer refused to recognize possible sins of a Davidite, according to Curtis and Mattson, of the Messiah, according to Michael Lee, or of Solomon, according to Rudolph and Brown. In Japhet's view, the unconditional nature of the dynastic promise, the sinful king is punished, but the dynasty will endure, does not agree with the chronicler's way of thinking, which sees the promise as conditional. Williamson believes that the conditionality of the promise relates only to Solomon. If he obeys, the dynasty will endure. Willie thinks that the chronicler omitted it because he knew of no event to which it could refer. Precision is difficult here. In any case, the omission links up with the shift in the chronicler's attention from the dynasty to the future temple builder Solomon, who could not commit a sin before the temple was built in 2820. So a suggestion that this could be possible was not to the point.
He couldn't commit a sin? That's okay. That's an interesting idea. So they just thought he went around sinless until he got the temple built.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah. And didn't he? No, he didn't kill his brother until after the temple because he grabbed onto the horns of the temple.
Or maybe it's just like, Trump can do no wrong because everything he does is not wrong.
Right.
So
right. Yeah. Well, the whole thing is dodgy. Right now, I'm trying to find the original reference to David being a man of blood and being, because of his, fighting and war, not being able to build the temple. Because it's a little softer here, the way you phrased it in your commentary, Tomer, about having to wait for a time of peace, which is a little less, you're not allowed to because you're a man of blood.
Yeah, I think some of the Jewish tradition is either like he was a man of blood, as in he did lots of battles and fighting and killing, and others are more specific that it's because the one person that he had killed, even though he didn't do it himself. What was his name? What's the name? Bathsheba's husband.
Uriah the Hittite.
Yeah.
Uriah the Hittite.
Specifically because of that sin, he wasn't allowed to. So when they said he was a man of blood, it didn't necessarily mean
didn't mean all of the massive slaughter. It was because he betrayed his friend and killed him. Although at least in 2 Samuel, the argument over can I build God a house? No, you can't is Samuel 7 or 2 Samuel 7, obviously. And Bathsheba is doesn't start until 11. So yeah, it's not sequential perhaps, but it does at least in 2 Samuel try and give a larger story arc in a broad sense.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I've already gone over how incredibly fucked up that was.
Yeah. Even though, it is weird that Solomon is the son from that relationship, and he had lots of other sons, but...
Well, but he isn't. The baby is supposed to have died.
Oh, but
God
isn't he
slowly
supposed to be
killed
one
the
of
baby.
sons of her? Didn't she have other sons or something?
Yeah,
like that?
after. But the one that might have been Uriah's had to die. Because of God, of course.
He did a what would you call it, like an abortion? But
a post-birth abortion. Only God.
Okay, so on verse 14, I will set him over my house and my kingdom forever. 2 Samuel 7:16 reads, your house and your kingship shall ever be secure before you. Knoppers writes that this difference is important. In Samuel, your house refers to David's dynasty, but in Chronicles, Yahweh establishes David's offspring in Yahweh's house, i.e. his temple. He writes that such a special tie between the house of Yahweh and David's successor, quote, indicates that David's heir is to have an official role in the temple, quote. Thus, the chronicler's work follows the pattern of ancient Near Eastern royal ideology, where kings have certain sacred privileges and responsibilities. And Japhet comments, quote, according to the Deuteronomistic view, expressed in both Samuel and Kings, David is the model king in the history of Israel. He is the measure both of righteousness and success, and the kings of Judah are repeatedly compared with him. In Chronicles, this evaluation has been modified. The fact that David did not build a temple confronted the chronicler with one of his most difficult theological problems. He coped with it in 3 ways. By augmenting David's role, attributing to him all the preparations for the actual construction of the temple, compare verses 22 forward. By toning down the ideal image of David, stating that the time was not yet ripe for the building of the temple, and refraining from comparing the kings of Judah with him. And by emphasizing that Solomon is the chosen of the Lord, equally and complementary to David. The present verse reflects this new outlook. Not David's day, indeed, but the combined reign of David and Solomon constitutes the climax of Israel's history, and it is in Solomon that the promise is fulfilled.
Somebody came up with a new battle name for you. I just saw in the chat. Tomer the Holy Ghostbuster.
I wonder how relevant is that? Like, I don't understand the reference.
You love busting those ghosts, don't you?
Don't go
you love
don't
it
go
when they
crossing the
bust.
streams.
Okay. Okay, so on 16, the Lord God, Hebrew Yehovah Elohim. The Samuel reading has Adonai Yehovah throughout the prayer. Japhet notes that this interchange has received much attention from scholars. Quote, this interchange occurs in this chapter only in the first 3 verses, but altogether 32 times in Chronicles. To evaluate this, one should be aware of the fact that the Tetragrammaton appears over 500 times in Chronicles and is by far the dominant divine title. We should also note that the ancient versions reveal a somewhat different picture, with fewer such changes to Elohim. The usage and meaning of these divine titles in Chronicles is clearly interchangeable and synonymous, and no theological conclusions can be drawn from the interchanges. The inevitable conclusion is that Chronicles cannot be counted a product of the Elohistic school, quote unquote, which refrained from theological reasons from using the Tetragrammaton, as demonstrated by Ecclesiastic and the Elohistic Psalms. The incidental variations, which appear mostly in fixed phrases, should be interpreted as the result of a long history of textual transmission.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like how a lot of the Christian hymns in Arabic countries actually use Allah, because that's just the word for God. So, and then some people get upset about it, as you do.
Okay. On 19, for the sake of your servant and according to your will. The Masoretic text reads, Be'avur avdecha vekelibecha. 2 Samuel 7:21 reads, for your word's sake and for your own accord. Ba'avur devarecha vekilbecha. Several scholars like Tulsinai, Rudolph, Myers, and Ackroyd, based on the Lachish letters, suggested vocalizing vekalbecha, your dog. Dirksen, however, writes that both the Old Testament and that both in the Old Testament and the Lachish letters, dog is used as an expression of humility without a suffix, and that there is a difference between dog and your dog. Moreover, dog is never used in relation to God. Thus, we are left with the question of the oldest reading, 2 Samuel or Chronicles. He writes, quote, the problem in the reading of 2 Samuel is that it is impossible to say to which word of God is being referred. Some commentaries on Samuel, including those by Smith and McCarter, therefore opt for Avdecha, but it is hard to explain the reading of 2 Samuel as secondary, while the Chronicles reading can be a deliberate adaptation to the vision of the chronicler, for whom God's promise through Nathan relates to the building of the temple. As regards the temple construction, in contrast to David's kingship, a reference to a previous promise makes no sense. If the chronicler read Devarecha in his vorlage, he solved this problem in a formally non-drastic and materially meaningful way. And finally, 25 through 27, Johnstone comments, quote, verses 25 through 27 round off the chapter, whereas 2 Samuel 7, 28 and 29 continues the petition in this section with imperatives and jussives. Chronicles resumes the past tense of the first section and includes the petition on the past tense. Chronicles thus solves the tension between the confession and petition of the first two parts. The Lord has acted and has revealed the significance of the action. It is his act that has enabled the petition, which has thus been taken up into the act of the Lord. The difference between Samuel and Chronicles is well expressed in the last verse. Whereas Samuel reads, and now continue to bless, by your blessing may the house of your slave be blessed forever. Chronicles reads, and now you have continued to bless, you have blessed and are to be blessed forever. End quote.
That's kind of hilarious. It just, reminds me of Christianity. You still had to give God the credit for everything, even praying to him. You had to give him the credit for, which is interesting.
So, question for verse 26 in the Hebrew. What's the word that's translated as? Is it promised in Hebrew? Is that like the word that's used there?
Hatova, tova. You could say that it's promise or like I think modern Hebrew means favor, but. Okay. I think in biblical it means like promise or favor.
Okay.
I mean, a good thing as well according to Knoppers.
Okay.
So
the Septuagint has a little bit of a different reading. It says, "And now, Lord, you are yourself God, and spoke to your servant these good things." Just used the word spoke. So the word that's used here is elalesas, which comes from laleo, which is just like it's just a general word for speaking. So it doesn't carry the connotation of a promise, which is interesting.
Oh, I mean, if you speak of he spoke, then it's also in Hebrew vatedaber, which means and he spoke. If that's what you refer to.
No, I was just wondering because like it's not the word for promise in the Septuagint, which is why I was wondering.
Okay. Okay. So I also have a Christian here, and that is Eusebius, who said that although Solomon built the temple, Nathan must have been referring not to Solomon but to Christ, who was the only one worthy to build the house of God.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Oh. We wrote this story based on copying all of our versions of these old ideas, which means that they were all foreshadowing, and it was totally intentional. The fuck?
Yeah.
Are we moving on then to Chronicles 19?
18.
Is it 18? Okay.
It
Yeah,
is
we are
18.
18.
Okay.
18 is short.
Yeah, it is short.
And
17
who's
verses.
reading that? I mean, I can if need be, but
I can read it. That's no problem. All right. Chapter 18. Some time afterward, David attacked the Philistines and subdued them. He took Gath and its villages from the Philistines. He defeated Moab, and the Moabites became subject to David and brought tribute. David also struck down King Hadadezer of Zobah toward Hamath as he went to set up a monument at the river Euphrates. David took from him 1,000 chariots, 7,000 cavalry, and 20,000 foot soldiers. David hamstrung all the chariot horses, but left 100 of them. When the Arameans of Damascus came to help King Hadadezer of Zobah, David killed 22,000 Arameans. Then David put garrisons in Aram of Damascus, and the Arameans became subject to David and brought tribute. The Lord gave victory to David wherever he went. David took the gold shields that were carried by the servants of Hadadezer and brought them to Jerusalem. From Tibbath and from Kun, cities of Hadadezer, David took a vast quantity of bronze. With it, Solomon made the bronze sea and the pillars and the vessels of bronze. When King Tu of Hamath heard that David had defeated the whole army of King Hadadezer of Zobah, he sent his son Hadoram to King David to greet him and to congratulate him because he had fought against Hadadezer and defeated him. Now Hadadezer had often been at war with Tu. He sent all sorts of articles of gold, of silver, and of bronze. These also King David dedicated to the Lord, together with the silver and the gold that he carried off from all the nations, from Edom, Moab, the Ammonites, the Philistines, and Amalek. Abishai, son of Zeruiah, killed 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. He put garrisons in Edom, and all the Edomites became subject to David. And the Lord gave victory to David wherever he went. So David reigned over all Israel, and he administered justice and equity to all his people. Bullshit. Joab, son of Zeruiah, was over the army. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was recorder. Zadok, son of Ahitub, and Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, were priests. Shavsha was secretary. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was over the Kerethites and the Pelatites, and David's sons were the chief officials in the service of the king.
First of all, if you hamstring horses, I will hamstring you.
yeah. So there's 900 horses, and let's just make sure that everybody understands this. 900 horses, and what they did with them was not kill them, which would have been easy to do, but they hamstring them, which means that it cuts the tendon so that in the back of their legs so that they can't stand up. And so you leave these horses to suffer in starvation and dehydration and everything, in agonizing pain, because you're a completely cruel, vindictive dick. This is God's guy.
It's not 9,000. It's
900.
No, it's not 900.
Well, it says there was 1,000 chariot horses, and they killed all but 100 of them.
Yeah, and there is also 7,000 horsemen.
Oh, yeah, okay, quite a bit more then. I forgot to count.
I mean, the Samuel reading has 1,700 horsemen, and so it could be like a
doing that to a single horse
Ever.
kind of deprives you of all of the godly righteousness that you might have wanted to claim.
I think the idea is that he's supposed to be a good king, so he's not allowed to have too many horses or something.
Yeah.
No, cause them to suffer needlessly.
Cope. The thing is, they already had this this weird relationship with horsemen and
Yeah.
cavalry, right? Like they didn't necessarily
Yeah.
like them. So him taking
Yeah.
any is for himself is weird. But
Yeah.
for the most part, they really didn't. They had provisions against getting horses from places. So
Yeah.
either way, it's fucked up.
Mm.
I find out you did that to a horse, I will remove your entire Achilles tendon so that it can never be reattached.
Yeah, wait, let me just check if that's not in this. Yeah. Knoppers writes that the reason for this is unclear. Was it because David's forces fought on foot, according to Peeters, or was it because David's forces already possessed a full complement of horses, according to Yadin? McCarter raises a third possibility, that of ritual punishment in the context of war. Judges and citing Joshua 11:6-9.
We're punishing the horses?
Well, God is an asshole. We've established this.
And
Yes.
but he writes that David retains 100 horses lends some credence to the second theory, i.e. that David's forces already possessed a full complement of horses.
Then sell them over the sea or to your allies, for fuck's sake.
Use them to pull plows. Like, it's not that complicated.
Yeah. You don't like chariots? Melt them down and make them into spears. I don't give a fuck.
Okay, so where was I? On the commentary on this is parallel with 2 Samuel 8. Just so you know. So, we'll start on verse 1. He took Gath and its surrounding villages. 2 Samuel 8:1 reads, David took Metheg Ammah. Pseudo-Kara and Gersonides suggested that Metheg Ammah was the name of the district which included Gath and its villages. Some scholars, like Klein and Dirksen, suggested that the chronicler attempted to make sense of the difficult reading in his Vorlage, with the former writing that this would represent, quote, a significant extension of David's hegemony to the west that seems improbable historically, end quote. Japhet, however, argues that historically speaking, the subjugation of Gath and its villages to David is not historically improbable, and in this case, Chronicles preserves an authentic, independent information about Gath's conquest. She writes, quote, the fact that the recurring formula and X became tributary vassals is not found in this context may indicate the non-formulaic and basically authentic nature of this information, but the limits of our knowledge and the nature of the material do not permit us to draw any definite conclusion about its historical value, end quote. Peshitta combined both readings, quote, David took the measuring line from the hand of the Philistines, and he took from the Philistines Gath and its villages. On verse 2, 2 Samuel 8:2 has the following addition, quote, he made them lie down on the ground and he measured them off with a cord. He measured out 2 lengths of cord for those who were who were to be put to death, and 1 length for those to be spared. End quote. Pseudo-Kara suggested that the chronicler merely abbreviated the writing. Some scholars suggested that the chronicler excluded the material from Samuel since it was, quote, extraneous or unflattering to David, end quote, according to Knoppers, also Curtis and Madsen, Rudolph, Brown, and Klein.
Because we wouldn't want to make the psychopath sound like a bad guy.
Yeah, I mean, that you see that a lot in Chronicles. Like
900 horses is fine.
Apparently. Japhet suggested that the omission was the result of a textual corruption, but Klein rejects this. Dirksen writes that the fact that 23 was adopted, 2 Chronicles 25:12, concerning King Amaziah, rather suggests that the chronicler did not understand the text of his Vorlage. On verse 4, 1,000 of his chariots, 7,000 charioteers. 2 Samuel 8:4 reads, 1,700 charioteers. Kimchi writes that the text in Samuel only counts the high-ranking officers of Hadad-Ezer's camp, whereas in Chronicles it counts all the horsemen. The Chronicles reading is attested in 4Q Samuel A and Septuagint on 2 Samuel, and is preferred. Sorry, I thought I heard myself.
I think there was just an echo of your voice briefly.
Okay.
Yeah, Peter,
So
what the hell's wrong up with that?
okay, so I'll repeat that. The Chronicles reading is attested in 4 Samuel A and Septuagint on 2 Samuel, and is preferred by modern scholars. Klein writes that the chronicler's larger number is not his own exaggeration, but derives from his copy of the text of Samuel that was different from the Masoretic text. He notes that D.R. Ap Thomas proposed that the original reading in Samuel was 1,000 chariots, 700 cavalry, and 20,000 infantry. He writes, however, that there is no indication that the proposed smaller number of cavalry ever appeared in a text of Chronicles.
Oh, for God's sake. It's always fun when there's these almost copied bits where you've got the same story told very similarly, but with some major differences. You're like, okay, did you copy him and adapt it? Did you both copy from the same thing, but miss parts? Who, where is the idiosyncrasy coming from? And yeah, with numbering systems, at least when you look at like a base 60 numbering system and then working with a decimal system, you can see how oddities would occur there. Or you could just listen to Hovind make up shit about horses and chariots and try and get rid of all of the contradictions with the power of pretend.
I'm sure the chariots are being pulled by I don't know, brontosaurus or something.
And Jesus rode the Velociraptor with his AK-47 strapped on.
Yeah. So just a second.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Nope.
Okay.
What?
So yeah, they're just laughing at me, Isaac. Just ignore the haters. So in verse 6, he put garrisons in the Aramean kingdom. The
I
Masoretic
was
text reads,
laughing with you, Tomer.
were you though?
I was.
I wasn't.
Sorry. I know, don't worry. Okay, so on verse 6, he put garrisons in the Aramean kingdom. The Masoretic text reads, and David stationed at Aram Damascus. 2 Samuel 8:6 reads, David stationed garrisons, in Hebrew Netzivim, in Aram Damascus. The Samuel reading is attested in a few Hebrew manuscripts and chronicles and early translations. Commentators take the omission of the garrisons to be the result of haplography, though Meyucha suggested that David appointed tax collectors.
Oh, good. Just like the Romans.
On verse 8, which Solomon used to make the bronze sea, the pillars, and various bronze articles. This clause is absent from 2 Samuel 8:8 of the Masoretic text, but appears in 4 Samuel A, Septuagint, and Vitus Latina on 2 Samuel, and Josephus in Antiquity 7:104-6. Japhet writes that the general tendency here conforms with the chronicler's inclination to ascribe to David as many of the actual preparations for the building of the temple as possible, in contrast to the attitude in Kings, as well as the significance assigned by the chronicler to the consecration of war booty to the Lord. She writes, however, that such a proleptic quote-unquote remark is not characteristic of Chronicles, based on the textual evidence. She writes that either the edition was first introduced into an unknown edition of 2 Samuel, and then transported from here both to Septuagint and to Chronicles, also Knoppers and Klein, or that it was introduced first into Chronicles and secondarily into a Hebrew version of 2 Samuel, which eventually served as the Vorlage of Septuagint, according to Curtis and Madsen and Pisano. She concludes, quote, in principle, the two possibilities are equally valid. The remark could have originated in the redactional activity of the chronicler, then to be transposed through a process of harmonization into the text of Samuel, or it could have originated in Samuel as the work of some anonymous redactor of the same school and theological inclinations as the chronicler, transferring to David the main burden of preparing for the building of the temple. If this was the case, we have here a demonstration that viewpoints regarded as chronistic, quote-unquote, were in fact the property of broader circles.
It is ironic, though, because the bronze sea, I thought it was supposed to originally have been made in the days of the tabernacle it was part of Moses, special plans from God, the bronze sea with the bronze bulls to hold it up that they could ceremonially wash in. Wasn't that?
There is a bronze, like, I don't know if they call it a base or a basin and its base.
Yeah,
or
but it's
something like
it's
that.
like
It's not,
it's very big.
it's
though.
not as big. It's not defined. It's not the same size, and it doesn't mention bulls.
The bulls at the pillars that held up the Bronze Sea. That did not.
Yeah,
literally,
I think that's only with Solomon. I
That
think
was the
in the
later
tabernacle
Solomon
is
one.
like a small thing that they could hold on.
Well, yeah, obviously you don't want to
Hold
carry
on stuff.
around
Yeah.
a bronze. A bathtub is one thing, but a bronze swimming pool is another.
Yeah.
Not
So I think
like-
Solomon's thing is called a sea, and like yam in Hebrew, literally like the sea, and the smaller one in the tabernacle is called the oh, Tom, and do you know what it's called?
The what?
The basin in the tabernacle next to the
Kiyom?
yeah, kior. That's the right word. Yeah. So you could translate that as like a basin or
In modern Hebrew, kiyom means sink.
sink. Oh yeah. That's modern Hebrew. That makes sense. But like, imagine at the time it probably maybe an urn might be a word, similar word or something like that. Like a large receptacle for water with taps on it.
Okay, so on verse 10, all kinds of articles of gold, of silver, and of bronze. 2 Samuel 8:10 reads, and in his hand were objects of silver, gold, and copper. The Masoretic text reading of vechor and all is elliptical and doesn't seem to fit with what goes before it. Rudolph in BHS suggested that either to translate the vav in vechor as a concomitant vav, or to read bechor in all. Dirksen, however, writes that there is no text-critical basis for the emendation, and that neither of the proposals solves this syntactic problem satisfactorily. He notes that commentators and translations generally assume that the verse in Chronicles means the same as in Samuel, but it is hard to say why the two words beyado hayu and in his hands were omitted. He suggests that the chronicler deliberately omitted the words, quote, booty can be made to serve the building of the temple, and this does not apply to presents from foreign kings. As a result of this omission, verse 10 is detached from the diplomatic mission and syntactically connected as casus pendens with verse 11.
Interesting. The idea that if we take it from foreign gods by force, we can use it for God. But if someone gives us a present, then God doesn't want that because dirty foreigners. What a lovely, lovely God.
Yeah. On 12 and 13, 2 Samuel 8, 13 and 14 mentions two wars, against Aram and against Edom. Whilst in Samuel, each description of the war is truncated, in Chronicles the two verses describe one war against Edom. Japhet writes that regarding verse 12, the accepted opinion is that the Chronicles reading is the correct reading, whilst in 2 Samuel 8:13 there's a textual corruption, with Edom changed to Aram. The subject of "and he stationed garrisons in Edom" in both texts is David, not Abishai. She writes that it is possible that Abishai was the commander of the army. She writes that it is possible that Abishai was the commander of the army, but it is hardly likely that the campaign was associated with him. In Psalm 62, the victory over Edom is in the Valley of Salt is attributed to Yoav, with similar evidence found in 1 Kings 11, 16, and 17. She writes that this is a textual corruption as well, and the proper construction is that of Rudolph, with "when he returned from Tzoba," Beshuvo Mitzova, being corrupted to Avishai ben Tzuriah. This reading, however, is rejected by Klein, who writes, quote, given the uncertainty of the textual reading, we are best advised not to come to a final decision on who led the attack on the Edomites during the reign of David, end quote. On verse 16, Avimelech, or Achimelech in NIV, the Masoretic text has Abimelech, or Avimelech, a reading preserved in Targum. 2 Samuel 8:17 reads Achimelech, a reading preserved in most early translations and a few Hebrew manuscripts. Most scholars prefer reading Achimelech. Knoppers notes that this is a case where textual criticism and literary criticism intersect. He writes, quote, "The evidence provided by verse 16 and other contexts in Chronicles suggests that Abiathar was succeeded already in the time of David by his son Achimelech, or Abimelech if one were to follow the Masoretic text of Chronicles. Admittedly, there are problems with this scenario. 2 Samuel 20:25 lists David's priests as Abiathar and Tzadok. 1 Samuel 22:20, 23:6, and 37 all indicate that Abiathar's father was Achimelech, while 1 Kings 2:26 discloses that Abiathar served as a priest until David's death. One could argue for the Masoretic text Chronicles reading on the supposition that Abimelech was the son of Abiathar and the grandson of Achimelech. Yet Abimelech is never mentioned again in Chronicles. Other texts in 1 Chronicles do refer, however, to Achimelech, 24:3, 6, and 31. One of these texts refers explicitly to this Achimelech as the son of Abiathar in 24:6. End quote. He writes that this has led many scholars to conclude that both Samuel and Chronicles are corrupt. Wellhausen, followed by Driver, suggested reversing the order, Abiathar son of Achimelech. While Knoppers calls it ingenious, quote unquote, it suffers two issues. One, it doesn't explain precisely how the textual corruption occurred, and two, it ignores the evidence of Chronicles. Instead, he writes that the preponderance of textual evidence indicates that the Chronicles of R'lash read Achimelech.
That wasn't my dog.
So it's probably Lilith. Yeah. Okay. So on Shafsha, several commentators note that Shafsha is not a Semitic name and is possibly either Egyptian or Hurrian. Klein notes that in Egypt, the secretary was the personal secretary of the pharaoh and his chief of staff. He notes Elred Cody's opinion that the name is a corruption of an Egyptian title, consisting of the words scribe and letter. 2 Samuel 8:17 and Peshita read Seraya. And finally, on verse 17, David's sons were chief officials at the king's side. 2 Samuel 8:18 reads, "And David's sons were priests." The Chronicles reading reads, "The sons of David who were first, Harishonim, next to the king's hand," which could be which could be read as "the first sons of David," according to Knoppers, or as a predicate of the sentence, "the sons of David, the first at the king's hands," according to early translations, traditionals, and most modern commentators. Japhet writes that while the chronicler attributes several cultic roles for David and Solomon, it is still hard to assume that he can define David's sons as priests, quote unquote. This version, in fact, is still difficult, since the king's sons are presented in a way that is not documented elsewhere. She writes that the priests were well-known people who were mentioned by name, and that never presented with a general collected definition, as we see in 1 Kings 4, 4, and 5. Thus, the Samuel reading could be a corruption of the original, which the chronicler presented as the first at the king's hand. She notes Wenham's opinion that originally the text read Sochanim, which was corrupted to Kohanim in Samuel, which was presented as Harishonim in Chronicles. Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Are we going to attempt another chapter?
Oh. What time is it?
Oh, hello, doggo.
Yes, this
For
is
me, it's like
Butter's puppy. Hello.
I think we could easily do another chapter.
Hello.
yeah. This commentary is short. I've only have 2.5 pages, so yeah, you could do that.
And then hell, even chapter 20. Look at that thing.
Oh
yeah,
God.
and then I have and we need to finish on 20 if we do this because they have a lot of unfinished commentaries.
Also 21. Oh boy. Oh boy.
No, it's the
God.
Satan one. Oh
yep,
no.
the Satan. Ooh, love it. Okay, so I guess you know what? I think it's Lilith's turn to read.
It is, isn't it? All right.
All right.
The battle against the Ammonites. All right. At least it's not a list of names. Let's go. In the course of time, Nahash, king of the Ammonites, died, and his son succeeded him as king. David thought, I will show kindness to Hanun, son of Nahash, because his father showed kindness to me. So David sent a delegation to express his sympathy to Hanun concerning his father. When David's men came to Hanun in the land of the Ammonites to express sympathy to him, the Ammonite nobles said to Hanun, do you think David is honoring your father by sending men to you to express sympathy? Haven't his men come to explore and spy out the country and overthrow it? So Hanun seized David's men, shaved them, cut off their garments in the middle at the buttocks, and sent them away. When someone came and told David about the men, he sent messengers to meet them, for they were greatly humiliated. The king said, stay at Jericho till your beards have grown, and then come back. When the Ammonites realized that they had become a stench in David's nostrils, because apparently they thought that he wouldn't be pissed off by this, Hanun and the Ammonites sent 1,000 talents of silver to hire chariots and charioteers from Aram Naharaim, Aram Mahak, and Zobah. They hired 32,000 chariots and charioteers, as well as the king of Macha. Right, sorry, more phlegm. So the answer is always more phlegm. With his troops, who came and camped near Medeba, while the Ammonites were mustered from their towns and moved out for battle. On hearing this, David sent Joab out with the entire army of fighting men. The Ammonites came out and drew up in a battle formation at the entrance to the city, while the kings who had come were by themselves in the open country. Joab saw that there were battle lines in front of him and behind him. So he selected some of the best troops in Israel and deployed them against the Arameans. He put the rest of the men under the command of Abishai, his brother, and they were deployed against the Ammonites. Joab said, if the Arameans are too strong for me, then you are to rescue me. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will rescue you. Be strong and let us fight bravely for our people and the cities of our God. The Lord will do what is good in his sight. Then Joab and the troops with him advanced to fight the Arameans, and they fled before him. And when the Ammonites saw that the Arameans were fleeing, they too fled before his brother Abishai and went inside the city. So Joab went back to Jerusalem. After the Arameans saw that they had been routed by Israel, they sent messengers and had Arameans brought from beyond the river, with Shopach, the commander of Hadazeah's army, leading them. Sorry. I'll let you out in a minute. When David was told of this, he gathered all Israel and crossed the Jordan, and advanced against them and formed his battle lines opposite them. David formed his lines to meet the Arameans in battle, and they fought against him. But they fled before Israel, and David killed 7,000 of their charioteers and 40,000 of their foot soldiers. He also killed Shopach, the commander of their army. When the vassals of Hadadezer saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with David and became subject to him. So the Arameans were not willing to help the Ammonites anymore. Interesting story, because the armies are there surrounded, and the people behind them are, the people in the one position are in front of a city, so they have somewhere to run to, and the people on the plains have mobility, but obviously nowhere to escape and shut themselves in. So dividing your army, I don't know if that's what Sun Tzu would have suggested, but
So I think in this section, one of the really interesting parts is so the people that David sends over to the Ammonites, they, what was the phrase here? Yeah, Hanun seized David's servants, shaved them, cut off their garments in the middle at their waists, and sent them away. So that's like, obviously it's humiliating, right? But at the same time, many cultures of the period, they could especially tell each other apart by how they style their hair, their facial hair, and how they dress. So this basically made them unidentifiable as part of Israel.
Yeah, any status that would have been given by the styles of the court or anything like that. Yeah, that would have been eliminated. But also, the image, I don't know if it was from this text directly, but the image I was always taught in Sunday school was that they had basically shaved them like, you see those people who act like a man and a woman on one each side, that they'd like basically draw a line down, shaved off, cut away half their clothes and shaved off half their hair and beard. I'm not sure where that image came from.
Yeah, the half the beard shaved is, I don't know, it's not explicitly written in Samuel.
No.
It is in as detailed elsewhere. But where elsewhere? Maybe it's a Targum, like a midrash.
Or midrash that the Christians adopted, because we always steal your stuff, but we never give you any credit, right?
Well, I'm sure like midrashic stories seem to have been shared around as well. Like they weren't just like, this is a Jewish midrash, therefore this story is not pre-existing. Because there are midrashic stories that are in the Quran, like the one about Joseph in Egypt, and Potiphar's wife comes and makes her ladies stand around peeling or cutting up a fruit or something, and then he comes in and they all cut themselves because he's so beautiful or something. Like that's literally that story is in the Quran, like in the main scripture. It's not even a hadith or anything. As far as I remember.
There's
hilarious.
quite a few things that were midrashic that were taken for the Quran. Also a lot of apocryphal stuff.
Yeah.
I think.
I mean, it's a good story. I'll give them that.
Well, I think in the Quran says it's oranges specifically, which I don't think makes any sense chronologically. I don't think oranges had made it to the Middle East by then, but I know. Time of Joseph doesn't make any sense. But
I think the importance of when David says remain at Jericho until your beards have grown and then return. I'm guessing that has something to do with the whole like don't shave thing.
Yeah.
it would have been seen as a big embarrassment.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it was half a beard, then it would be embarrassing either way. But yeah.
Either way,
we could just shave the other half and come, right?
No, it was stylistic. It was
stylistic part. And the stylized beards and stylized hairdos, you can see them in the carvings, various places, various, the pharaoh always has, even if he has to wear a little gold one, he always has this type of beard, and the Babylonians, they have these certain kinds of braids, and it's
they also have very like their beards are very formed almost. And, like, in Egyptian artwork, like Semitic peoples are always shown with beards, so it must have been probably was a thing before them. Like I don't know if you'd call it fashion or if it was ritual.
Is that where the dwarves got it? The Tolkien dwarves with their giant beards and we can never
there is
shave
an
our
argument to say
beards.
that the dwarves are based on European Jews in a way, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean a little bit in some ways.
Well, I think he tried to make the dwarf language sound Semitic as well. But I don't know if it's, I mean, I don't think he was necessarily trying to make a stereotype or anything like that.
No, he wasn't
not like
trying to do any kind of a bad. I mean, that's the problem when you use cultures as an inspiration. You don't want to use like toxic tropes of the culture, but the culture still has defining and interesting characteristics that can be adapted to a story.
I mean, ultimately, the dwarves that he was featuring in his story, many of them at least, had heroic proportions. They're respected characters. They weren't all comedy relief, right?
Exactly.
Oh no, the dwarves were almost never comedy relief. In the actual writings, the elves are comedy relief much more often. Oh, I'll go catch the sun, Legolas.
Tolkien has a famous letter, I think he wrote about when someone asked him to.
Oh, to the Nazis before the war, when the Nazis had just come in.
They were asking him about his heritage or something.
Yeah,
they
to
wanted
see if
to know
he had any.
Ban his book. or something.
Yeah, well, they were going to translate it into German, and they
Oh.
wanted to know that he was pure-blooded enough for the Reich to do that. And he wrote 2 letters and sent them to his publisher and said, you can choose which one to send, but I know which one I'd like to send, basically responding to it. One which was more diplomatically worded, and one which was basically very, very insulting, sharp edge of the tongue all the way through, including mocking their own pseudo-scientific ideas about Aryans, since that's actually supposed to be a group of like northern
Hyperboreans.
Indo-Asian, like a North India area.
Yeah.
And then he's like, when it comes to the Jews, alas, I appear to have no ancestry from that illustrious and noble race.
That's what
He's like,
yeah.
it's just fuck you in the most British way possible. Just very British.
Yeah, so if he took inspiration, like for his different cultures in his world, it makes sense, and he wasn't necessarily using like it in a negative way.
I had another question.
There is some.
I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
And I'm done. Sorry.
Okay. I had a question about King Nahash. I realize that there's no vowels in here in Hebrew, so I have no way of reading this English translation. Does this mean snake, or is that just a word similar to?
I mean, it could mean snake, right? It's not it's not uncommon to see people named after animals in the Bible or nature in general. So
I mean, but the word as you see it, is that? I mean,
it's the same.
Nahash.
It's the same as Nachash, which means snake.
It's the same as the Hebrew word for snake. Yeah, I mean, so he's supposed to be the king of the Ammonites. Yeah. The Ammonite language was very, very similar to Hebrew, so I imagine it meant snake for them as well. And we've seen like the king of Shechem is called Samar, which means a donkey. So using names of animals seems to be very common. A lot of Hebrew names are also animal names. Leah, Deborah, like Bumblebee, Heifer,
Lilith. It's associated with an owl.
Owl. Yeah, night owl.
It should be noted that this name doesn't appear in 2 Samuel 10:1, as well as in the Septuagint.
Right.
It just says
there's also the possibility with a king of naming them, giving them a
regnal name,
like a polemical name.
A polemic name, or a moniker earned in some way, association with some animal,
like King Doofus or some shit like that.
Or King Richard the Lion-Hearted. His courage is like a lion, yada yada. Because snakes can be good or bad. They can be symbols of wisdom and cunning, or they can be symbols of evil. And it kind of depends who's naming.
Well, in this story, Nachash is the good king, and Hanun, his son, is the one who does the backstabbing. So,
now, does Nahash mean just general snake, or is there a subcategory?
I think it means snake in general.
I think in the Bible it's used in a very generic word, almost like serpent, all snakes. I don't think there's any like. I think there are times where it says like fiery snakes, which has a different word. Is it like seraphim?
Right. But this word Nahash doesn't mean specifically cobras or anything. It's just any old snake.
Well, the thing is, like any kind of serpent, right? Because it is, like in some ways, it could be calling back to, the mythos of like the defeat of the serpent, which in some context could have been, Lotan or the sea, or it's different in the few texts. It's actually kind of complicated. But while the book doesn't deal exclusively with snakes, it does deal with serpents. The Dragon, the Mountain, and the Nations, from Robert Miller. It's pretty solid, pretty good study of this stuff.
Okay,
but he definitely ties in the like the motif of the slaying of the serpent. We get that in Job once, maybe twice. And then in from
And Job, it
Ugaritic
uses
text.
Nachash, or does it use a word like what's the word? A different word that means like sea monster or something.
I don't remember.
Leviathan?
No, it's another word I'm thinking of.
I think it might be based off of Lotan.
Yeah.
So maybe it is.
Yeah, Leviathan,
Leviathan.
yeah.
Yeah.
What's the word?
Yeah. But
Anin. Anin is the word I'm thinking of.
I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and check. But
Yeah.
the thing is that same language appears in Ugaritic literature as well. But I think the way that it's used in many cases, from what I've seen, at least, Nahash would be like general serpent, so not even necessarily snake.
Right. In a mythological sense, it might refer to something.
So
with
that's
legs.
important because I'm in an argument with somebody else on that very word, who says that it must mean snake, that it cannot, because I said that it meant that Nahash could mean lizards as well as snakes, that it doesn't necessarily specify or distinguish snakes from lizards, and he's saying it necessarily does.
I don't know, because they wouldn't. I don't think they would have been making those kinds of designations. But like those,
definitely
those
not
biological, like cladistics, you're not going to find that in the Bible.
I don't think they would have used the word for that, like that word for like a gecko, for example. But maybe,
sure, yeah,
something. If they were aware of, let's say, Nile monitor lizards, let's say, they might have referred to them as Nachash, let's say, possibly.
Yeah. And that was another thing he specifically said they did not do. He said they never used that word to refer to Nile monitors. I'll show you after the show. This ridiculous argument.
Of course they never did. He knows, because that would undermine his points. So obviously it never happened.
Yeah, there is a list of animals when it talks about the kosher and non-kosher, clean and unclean, and it mentions like a list of what they call sherat sim, or like creeping things, and we don't necessarily know what every single animal on that list is, but traditionally some of them are translated as different types of lizards, like a chameleon is one of them, I think. And
I didn't want to,
but then there's also things like
this. I do want to talk to you about it after, though.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Oh, well, look at that burn getting us back on track. All right, let's go.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll start on verse. So again, mentioning that this is parallel with 2 Samuel 10. So on verse 3, explore and spy out the country and overthrow it. The Masoretic text reads, Lachkor v'lafoch v'leragel haaretz. 2 Samuel 10:3 reads, Ba'avur chakor et ha'ir v'leragla v'leofcha, meaning to explore the city, spy it, and overthrow it. Chronicles rearranges the order of the second and third verbs in Samuel, and makes the object of the espionage being the land and not the city. Selman writes that while the order of the verbs is strictly illogical, the Masoretic text can be accepted by regarding the last as resuming an intention expressed in the first two. Septuagint reads, to investigate the city and to spy out the land. Klein notes McCarter's opinion, following Ehrlich, that hafach means overthrow, only when Yahweh is the subject, and notes that Targum on Samuel understands the verb here in the sense of espionage activities. Knoppers, however, writes that this argument is spacious, and that although hafach can have a variety of nuances in the Hebrew Bible, to turn, change, overthrow, and transform, it never means to spy. Peshitta reads, to explore the city and to know the exits and the entrances.
I mean, even if it's true, to abuse diplomats coming to, congratulate you on your ascension to the throne and also say sorry about your dad's passing, like, even if you suspect they're going to spy, which, let's face it, they're probably totally there to spy too, it's not good form to mutilate their clothing and publicly humiliate them and all that. It's just, there's the entire story has them starting shit for no reason. And that's, I don't know how accurate it is, but it definitely creates the narrative that Israel is completely blameless in the starting of this war.
Yeah. Okay, on verse 4, Hanun sees David's envoys shaved them. 2 Samuel 10:4 reads, he shaved one half of their beards. The Chronicles reading could suggest that the shaving included the removal of all their body hair, according to Johnstone and Klein, or just the beard and head hair, according to Vulgate, Peshitta, which reads half of their beards and half of their heads, and Japhet. Though Selman writes that...
Sorry.
Though Selman writes that shaved them is probably one of the many examples of the chronicler's preference for abbreviation.
I really don't need to know if they shaved their balls. I don't.
I don't think they had Manscaped back then.
They weren't like location, location, location.
On verses 6 and 7, Japhet notes that the parallel readings of this section in 2 Samuel 10:6 and 4Q Samuel A have distinct differences, and each of these versions had gone through editing stages. She notes that the text in 4Q Samuel A is closer to Chronicles. Quote, in 2 Samuel 10:6b, the opening is, and the sons of Ammon sent. In Hebrew, Vayishlechu b'nei Ammon. And in verse 6b here, and Hanun and the sons of Ammon sent. Vayishlach Hanun v'bnei Ammon. The continuation in 2 Samuel is Vayiskeru, and in Chronicles, the continuation is longer and includes additional information. Part of the additional text in Chronicles appears in 4 Samuel A, and this fact indicates that the Chronicles reading is based on a different vorlage than the Masoretic text of 2 Samuel 10. The next verse has the opposite phenomena. There's an expanded version in the second Samuel reading, and a shorter version in 4 Samuel A and Chronicles. End quote. She writes that the Chronicles reading is a deliberate abbreviation of the source in Samuel, since the number 32,000 is the sum of numbers which appears separately in Samuel, 20,000 and 12,000. The governing noun is then altered from footmen to chariots, as is reflected in 4 Samuel A. From these and other observations, she concludes, quote, A, it seems that none of the existing texts reflects the original story fully and accurately. B, while the texts of 2 Samuel and Chronicles are more or less of equal length, they differ in the extent to which they preserve the original material. C, it would seem that both texts display an abbreviated form of the original, but a different manner of reworking has been adopted in each text. In the Masoretic text of 2 Samuel, the text is abbreviated by actual omissions of certain sections. Thus, in the present text of 2 Samuel, two quite long passages are simply absent, leaving no trace. By contrast, the Masoretic text of Chronicles, and also 4 Samuel A, is reached through abbreviation by summary. Two sections in the original are represented in a summarized form. D, in 4 Samuel A and Chronicles, 4 Samuel A and Chronicles reflect the same textual tradition. On 17, he advanced against them. 2 Samuel 10:17 reads, and he came to Chelem, or Chela'ama. The Samuel version is preferred by most modern commentators, though Dirksen writes that Chelam is an otherwise known place name, and possibly, as Rudolph and Curtis and Madsen suspect, is an error brought about by Chilam of 2 Samuel 10:16, Chilam with Yud instead of Aleph. He writes that the text of 2 Samuel 10:17 runs more smoothly, but there is no text-critical basis for amending Chronicles. The purpose of the change is perhaps to give more initiative to David. And finally, on 18, David killed 7,000 of their charioteers and 40,000 of their foot soldiers. 2 Samuel 10:18 reads, David killed 700 Aramean charioteers and 40,000 horsemen. The Lucianic recension and Vitus Latina there read 700 Aramean charioteers and 40,000 infantry. The Chronicles reading is preserved in early translations and Josephus in Antiquity 7 1-8. Dirksen notes that foot soldiers is generally regarded as the superior reading, since otherwise the foot soldiers are lacking in the text of Samuel. Klein writes that Chronicles depends at least partially on a non-Masoretic text reading in its vorlage. He notes Apthomas's reconstruction of the original text, quote-unquote, as 1,000 chariots, 700 cavalry, and 20,000 infantry. Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. And do we really believe these numbers?
Should we?
I'm just wondering.
You believe in numbers?
Are we moving on to 20?
I mean, Yeah, it's kind of like the largest inauguration ever. No one has ever had so many people at their inauguration. It was the biggest.
Yes, that's my thought. Just tens of thousands. How often are they killing tens of thousands? It's like every other day they're killing tens of. They don't reproduce that well. Anyway,
Well, if you do the math for the Israelite people and the so-called men of war, I mean, every woman was apparently shooting out 60 babies in her lifetime, if you want to run those numbers, which I no.
Yeah. So my wife has asked me to run to. There's a place she wants to go, and it's not going to stay open very long. So I'm going to have to bail out a little early. I know we were going to be doing this really short chapter, but I think I have to call it closed.
We've done several chapters today, though.
Yeah. We did
all right.
well.
Well, thank you all.
Yeah.
All right. Any closing comments?
Yeah, make sure to join the Discord. If you haven't, you're a bozo and you don't want to be a bozo. Make sure to subscribe to Milwaukee Atheist. That's the best channel on the internet. Got some good stuff coming out. So if you want to, I think this week I'll be coming out with a video about how the Bible got chapters and verses, because those are not original, as we all know. So I'm going to talk about that. And
Isn't that Stephen Langton?
That was one person in the puzzle. I think he was the guy that we got. Like we only got like part of it from him, because he divided chapters into like sections, and he actually labeled them with letters, and then someone else actually took his like the way he had it, and like he made the short chapters like only 4 letters. Well, yeah, it is different. We have like numbered stuff from Stephanus. The first Complutensian polyglot had like chapter markings but not numbers. Didn't have verses, but the second edition added chapter numbers in each translation of because it's a polyglot, so it has multiple translations. So it had actual chapter numbers and verse numbers.
Well, that's good, because especially if you have it written out in several languages, you want to be sure you line up everything.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of them weren't, or they just favored one text to have the numbers, but not all of them. So it's
Did anyone use like the Jewish division of the books, the 5 books of Moses, into like weeks and days? Because they would read the whole book in a year. So there's like a parasha.
So I think that they actually did. I think that someone actually did.
Like growing up, it was like this week's parasha is blah blah blah.
Yes. I think someone did do that. I forget when, but that is definitely also part of it. So there's a lot of stuff going into this. But luckily, a lot of work has already been done on it. So it's just interesting stuff. One of the dumbest things I found was the numbering in Revelation. And I don't think I forget if I think Revelation has 21 chapters. But one of the early numberings for it, or I should say the early divisions, there was this guy, Andrew of Caesarea. It was in like the 6th century. He actually divided it into 24 chapters because there were 24 elders.
Yes, the 24 elders of Israel.
Yeah, each chapter he divided into 3 subchapters because of their tripartite nature, and that is of course body, soul, and spirit. So it was just he didn't actually like bother like looking at its structure at all. He's just like, this is the spiritual way to do it. So
of course, because what matters more than fucking magic?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I plan on covering. So excited for that one.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Can't wait.
Thank you all.
And because I mentioned the world standing still verse, blah blah blah, go check out Lawrence's video on biblical cosmology.
Yeah, damn right.
Just
definitely do
video.
that. It's
Yeah.
the best.
They got an hour and a half to kill.
Yeah, I would concur.
For you, I have to do it. So maybe I'll play some Diablo 4 this afternoon, out of loyalty to the tribe, and watch all your videos or listen to them.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye bye.